In this video, I will be surviving 100 days of Minecraft in the new 1.17 Caves and Cliffs update. Now sadly, neither the caves nor the cliffs changed nearly as much as we all thought it was going to, but I really wanted to challenge myself to see just how much I could accomplish in essentially 33 hours of Minecraft, and to try and use as many of the new blocks as I possibly could. So if you liked the video, please leave a like, otherwise you're gonna make my new little axolotl buddies cry, and we don't want that. But yeah, with that being said, let's get right into it. To start off, I'm an absolute baby when it comes to Minecraft, so I knew I was not going to make it in hardcore. So I set the world to a basic survival world, set it to easy mode, and we just got cracking. I was such a baby that I even gave myself a bonus chest, so like a thug, I didn't even have to punch any trees because I had an axe right off the bat. We actually got a really lucky spawn to start off with, and I spawned right in between a couple of dark oak biomes, and as all good imperialists do, I decided to go and raid the neighbors, until I found a clearing that I could turn into a forever home. I knew I would need a mine, so I started one in this little clearing, and this is actually where I first encountered the new raw iron and the copper drops. I was really confused at first because I hadn't seen it up until this point. I'm actually really enjoying it because if you're smart enough about it and you use fortune, you can get way more iron than you could get before. And then Taddy Daddy went Betty bye and it was on to day 2. Day 2, I kept working on the mine, and I got it all the way down to y equals 11 so that I could get diamonds. And then I had my first brush with death when a pit of lava started throwing gang signs at me, so I scurried back up to the surface to safety. Being a good German boy from Missouri that I am, I decided to draw on my roots, and I started a farm before it was time to go right back down to the mines for more grueling labor. Much like the late 19th century, most of day 3 was spent in the mines. I got plenty of resources doing this, and we actually got enough iron to make a chest plate before I made the ultimate discovery of diamonds and screamed, "Oh, let's go!" like a middle-aged father at a t-ball game. Now, because I'm the biggest Brian, I made the decision to only mine enough of these diamonds so that we can get an enchanting table so that I can come back to them once we have fortune later. With these newly acquired diamonds, I wanted to get started on an enchanting table, so I returned to the surface to keep working on the farm. I knew the crops would only get me so far, so I started wandering around until I found a cow who decided to bring his best bud, the sheep, along with him. The sheep was totally third wheeling, but you know what? I let him stay. And by the end of day 4, I had enough cows to really start making PETA mad, so I decided to hit the hay and let them do their thing. I started off day 5 by finishing getting the animals into their little playpen, but then I got jealous that they had a house before I did, so I cut down a couple of trees and started throwing down some of those new blocks whose names I've already forgotten 20 times. I'm pretty sure it's called Deep Slate or something, but honestly that sounds like a secret government project, so I'll call it Fancy Cobble. Days 6 and 7 were a little bit slower because I continued working on the house and me baby, and I couldn't decide whether or not I liked the pillars that I was putting on the sides, and then I eventually gave up and decided to just throw a roof on it and call it good enough. Being the great entrepreneur that I am, I decided to make a cow matchmaking service on day 8, and then I started working on a larger wheat farm that I wanted to make, during which I remembered I stopped working on the house because I had run out of materials, so it was back to the mines for Taddy Daddy. I was still mining at the start of day 9 before I was able to go back up to the surface and reap the rewards from the wheat farm that I had been working on. Despite the fact that I was quite low on food, I decided to use all of this to make the cows get all hubba hubba for one another. At the time, I definitely wanted to have extra food so that I could go on a longer mining trip, but I knew if I didn't invest in these cows, I wasn't going to be able to get an enchanting table as quickly as I wanted to. Day 10 was just a dusty and dreary day that I spent almost entirely in the mine. Hopefully my children will know a better and brighter future than I. By day 11, I realized we had been doing a lot of menial tasks with not a lot to show for it, so I wanted to spend today mostly on the surface. So I cut down a few trees, said goodbye to some of my favorite Mooey boys, and then we started working on an enchanting room. Despite decimating my cow population, I realized we didn't even make a small dent in creating that enchanting room. So I was gonna have to do some morally reprehensible things before this was all said and done. With this in mind, day 12, I started ramping up production on my wheat farm, and I decided to expand the cow pen so that I could get a lot more of them to, utilize for future endeavors. At this point, it was basically just a waiting game for both the cows and the wheat, so I decided to start making a little road that I would connect all my builds together with, and then I just called it a day. Begrudgingly, on day 13, I trudged back into the mines because somehow I was out of coal. Not really sure how that happened, I was barely using it, but whatever. And then I made the cows keep getting it on so that we could get more leather. On day 14, I was, you guessed it, still making the cows breed before I realized that the mine looked like the back alley of a Chuck E. Cheese, so I decided to put a cute little building around it to make it less threatening, and then I went back to animal husbandry. On day 15, I decided to turn my ghetto house into a ghetto home, and it led to just meh results. So then I went over and continued to have the cows go all bow chicka wow wow before I used their skin to keep working on the enchanting room. By day 16 we were, oh crap, I forgot about the wheat farm! So then I worked on that for a bit before we took all that wheat to go have the cows make more babies. Look, I'm not proud of what I did, but we need those enchantments. And then tonight was the first night that I was actually able to sleep in my house, so it's officially a home. We continued the farming on day 17, and by this point I was getting so much wheat from the farms that I actually couldn't breed the cows as fast as I was getting the wheat. So I finally had like a decent food source. This ain't much, but I loved it. By day 18, it really started to dawn on me that I might have a problem because I could not stop myself from farming. Anytime I got seeds, I just kept planting them in the ground and I kept making it bigger and bigger and I just wouldn't quit. It was not useful anymore. I just liked having bigger farms. So yeah, not the most productive day, but this did give me enough time for everything to grow so that I was almost done with my enchanting table. After what felt like forever, I finally had the enchanting table up and running by day 19, and I actually had enough levels that I could immediately enchant my diamond pick, and got dummy lucky to get fortune 3 right off the bat. So I went to do the responsible thing, and I kept farming. But things changed on day 20. For starters, we were back streaming on Twitch again. Go follow me there if you want to see stuff like this live. But more importantly, I finally decided to put that fortune pick that I had gotten to use, and we headed back down into the mines to pick up a lot of the diamonds that I had just left sitting around. Then I used these diamonds to make some armor, and then we enchanted it so I could finally go to the heck dimension. Now look, normally I'm a little baby about stuff like this because it's a dangerous place, but I knew that mining quartz was a great way to get XP, and I didn't really have any better ways to do it, so I wanted to enchant things, and me baby, I went. For some reason, I was fine with staying in this hellscape all of day 21, and I only returned back home on day 22 once I had 30 levels, which I promptly wasted enchanting an iron axe. I don't know why, that was very stupid. At this point, I was kind of sick of the nether, so I decided if I was gonna get XP, I may as well just mine in the overworld. By day 23, I was already bored of this plan, so instead of mining to get the XP itself, I was going to use the resources that I was getting from that to build up really high and create an XP farm really high in the sky. But before I could finish mining, I found my first little oxalotl, I don't know. I call him Mud, and he lives in my pond now. On day 24, I actually got started on the XP farm itself before I promptly ran out of materials, so back to the mine we go. This is becoming a common thread if you can't tell. By day 25, I finally escaped that wretched mine, and I was actually able to use some of the soul sand that we got from the nether to make a bubbly little water elevator that would take you up to the mob farm. However, this took way longer than I care to admit because I kept falling off the side, but by the end of the day, I was actually able to start getting the spawn platforms built so that I could— Damn it! We're out of cobblestone again! Surprise, surprise, day 26 is being spent in the mine again. Except this time, I found another little water buddy, except this one was pink, so I called her Apple Pie. And now we got Mud and Apple Pie, and they're best friends. And then I was able to keep working on the XP farm. To absolutely nobody's surprise, on day 27, I once again ran out of cobblestone, so it was back to the mine. But on day 28, I finally had enough to where we could finish up that stupid XP farm, and I could waste as much time as I wanted killing the mobs for their juicy little green orbs. And waste time I did, because I spent all of days 29 through 34 grinding away at this XP farm. Now, I know that sounds tedious, but you have to realize, at this point in the game, the big thing left to do is to go and fight the Ender Dragon. And in order to do that, you need to have the best armor and tools that you can possibly get, and there was no other way that I was going to get that other than just grinding away at this thing and hoping I got lucky. The cool thing about this XP farm that we created is that it will spawn any mob, and that includes Enderman. So the entire time that I was grinding away at this, I was also able to kill Enderman, and I ended up with a total of 12 Ender Pearls. So now, I don't have to ask my wife's boyfriend when I want to go to the end. On day 35, I started prepping for a deep trip into the nether because I knew the only thing that stood between me and the end was a bunch of blaze rods. I knew that meant that I was gonna have to get lucky and find a nether fortress as quickly as possible, so I spent most of day 35 just getting food and making sure that everything was set for my trip to the nether. So on day 36, I yeeted myself into that portal, and it only took me about 10 minutes until I found my first fortress. And with my superior intellect and unbeatable armor, I only almost died like a couple of times. But between days 36 and 37, I was able to get all of the blaze rods I needed, and I even managed to nab a wither skeleton skull before heading back, which is dummy lucky. I made it back to the overworld day 38, and I really didn't know what to do. I was basically done with everything I could do before I actually went to the end, so I decided to start stockpiling and get as much food as I could so that there was no way I was going to starve in another dimension. And then I said my final prayers and got ready for the next day. Day 39, I was definitely stressing over the fight that was to come, so I decided to just work on my farm, and I used up all of the remaining seeds that I had left over. And then I decided it's now or never, so I started up another stream on Twitch and let the journey begin. Using the eyes of Ender to guide me, I sailed the seas, trekked through the mountains, and even committed a horrible atrocity on a horse, all before the eyes led me to a special spot in the ground, where I broke the first rule of Minecraft and dug straight down until I found a stronghold. Now, not to brag or anything, but usually I'm pretty quick with these, but this one was a damn labyrinth, and took me all the way through day 41 to navigate, until I found myself on the precipice of Minecraft's final boss. Now, because this wasn't hardcore, I knew that there was a decent chance that I was going to die to the dragon and needed somewhere to respawn that was close by, so I set up a little base right outside of the portal and prepared to enter. At the start of day 42, I placed my Eyes of Ender into the portal and hopped through to a terrifying glitch that immediately made me rethink my decision. No! No! I didn't- Oh my gosh! Don't do that to me, game! Luckily though, we were fine, and before me stood the dragon in all her glory. Being the Minecraft pro that I am, I knew to go for the pillars first, and I took them out one by one, mostly with the bow. There were a few close calls, but we made it through this part relatively unscathed. And now she had nothing left to heal herself with, and I could take her out one-on-one. Die, Stinky! I quickly got down so I could start whooping her by the exit portal, and she decided to throw me around like a child with a snake. Ah! Oh my gosh! Oh my gosh! Oh my gosh! Oh my gosh! What the hell? No! Not again! Not again! But much like that snake, I bit back hard, and before I knew it, she was done for. And in only 42 days, I have technically beaten Minecraft. Poggers! But I'm not done yet. Fellas, we still have another 57 days to fill up. I'm not done. So in the end, after you beat the dragon, you can head over to end cities that will give you plenty of good loot. And more importantly, you can find elytra, which are essentially wings that you can fly with. Now for my plans, I need some elytra. So I threw myself straight into one of these end gateways and went and searched for an end city. And actually, funny story about that. 10 days! It took 10 entire days, which is over 3.5 hours, to find a single end city that had this stupid boat. Finally, on day 53, my misery came to an end as I peered off into the distance to see the floating land of purple space clams. Yes! Yes! Wait, tell me that has it. Me. Yes! Yes! We found it! And whether by blind luck or a cruel twist of fate, there was actually a second city right next to it that had another pair of elytra. Are you kidding me? There's another one right there with another one! So, in order to store all of the loot that I was going to get from these, I was going to need shulker boxes, so the sky clams had to lose life privileges as I made my way up the end city. I got some dummy good loot while I was in there, and then I set my sights on the end ship. It did not go well. No! Oh! Why am I not going up more? Why am I not going up more? No! 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 Oh my gosh! No, 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 no! 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 Come on, come on, come on, come on, come on. Yeah! And after what felt like years spent in the air, I entered the ship and seized my first pair of elytra. Let's go, boys! I can fly! With my newly acquired wings, I flew to the adjacent end city on day 54, where I was promptly trapped in a room by shulkers for 5 straight minutes. No! No, 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 no! Die! Thank you. Using my expert PvP skills, I killed them off, and I made it through the second end city much faster than I had the first one. And I had the elytra sooner than I expected. All of the good loot went into my ender chest, and I started to make the journey back home. On day 55, I made it back to the overworld where I had forgotten that I reset my spawn right next to the end portal, so we were good and lost. I managed to make my way back to the surface and took an absolute guess as to which direction my house was, and we just started running. And in my decrepit armor, I zooted past some baddies and somehow managed to make it back home after 16 days in space. I was tired, hungry, and needed a bath, but we were victorious. I got right back to work on day 57, and I went to a nearby village to kidnap some villagers so that I could breed them and their children would give me cheap loot. And y'all thought this game was PG. They immediately started crying about wanting to go home or whatever, so I had to put a wall around there so they wouldn't run away. And I finished the day trying to force one of them to be a librarian who would give me a mending book. When I woke the next morning, I saw that these ungrateful little villagers had tried to make a run for it the night before, so I coaxed them back into their little box. After quite a bit of convincing, I finally got the one guy to be a librarian, and eventually he offered me a mending book, so I gave him paper and forced him into a dead-end job for the rest of his life. Sucks to suck. I finished off the day by breaking the only composter I could find in the village, but the farmer wouldn't stop being homesick, so I gave up and went to bed. Day 59, I was determined to get that farmer to forget about his former life, so I spent most of the day looking for his precious composter, but to no avail. So instead, I kidnapped the potion dude and forced him to forget his former life, and now we have 2 farmers in the box. I traded with him to keep him a farmer, and then I built up the walls a little bit more to crush whatever spirits they had left. By day 60, I was tired of having to kidnap villagers, so I tried throwing food at the ones that we already had until they would make children. Apparently though, having me stand over them really kills the mood because they just kept eating my food and wouldn't make a little dude. After a while, I got bored of this, so I went back to farming, and by the time I came back and tried to feed them again, they already made a cute little baby, and I was so happy. Now that I knew I had a reliable way to get babies, I wanted to be able to trade with all the villagers that I had, so I spent most of day 61 gathering up as many crops as I could and bone milling all that stuff again so I could get even more, so that eventually I could trade with them, and by the end of the day, I had my first mending book. I then realized that I still had 65 levels left over from defeating the Ender Dragon, so I spent the early part of day 62 enchanting all of my tools and armor so that I could waste the extra levels until I finally used the mending book on my elytra. But I was greedy for more, so I went right back to farming so that I'd be able to trade for more mending books soon. I spent all of day 63 farming so that on day 64 I was able to go and get 2 more mending books, and I added these to my pickaxe and my pants. And with a full stack of days under our belt, I wanted to upgrade my diamond armor, and so I ruined the natural landscape of a desert and made a bunch of TNT so that we could go and bore through the heck dimension to find some netherite. Day 65, I spent laying waste to anything and everything in my path throughout the nether. I know this sounds very lumbersome, but it left us with a ton of materials, and we finished the day with 3 ancient debris, 1 less than we needed for our first netherite ingot. However, I was out of TNT at this point, so on day 66, we went back to clearing out the desert and made a bunch more TNT to keep mining. On day 67, I ended up using all of the TNT that we had made the day before, and by this point, we actually had enough ancient debris that I could make 2 entire netherite ingots. So I headed back up to the overworld, we crafted the netherite, and I added them to my pants and my pickaxe to make them a shiny black color, and then we went night-night. Day 68, I used up the last of the gunpowder that we had from our XP farm, and I made as much TNT and fireworks as I could, which admittedly was not a lot. So when I got to the nether, I decided to heck with that. I just started mining with my bare pickaxe, and we kept going until I got more netherite. Nice. On funny number day, I went balls to the walls mining netherite, and I found enough ancient debris to satiate my hunger, so I zip-zap-zopped my way back home, and I turned my blue t-shirt into a black one, and now I look clean. Day 70, I realized that I'd been neglecting a lot of the chores that I really needed to do, so I started off the day by fixing up some of the creeper holes in my house and my enchanting room. I then remembered that I had left a bunch of stuff in my ender chest that I couldn't access, so I went and mined up some obsidian and used my last Eye of Ender to get all of the space goodies before we watched the sunset and went to bed. The next day, I wanted to get started on some new buildings, so I started cutting down trees and doing landscaping on a spot by my house. Eventually though, I decided on making a storage room, so I threw down a bunch of logs, but then I realized logs are very expensive to build with, so I had to go kill more of the ecosystem before the day was through. Day 72, I kept working on the storage room, and I made myself a stone cutter so that I could try working with a bunch of different fancy blocks. I absolutely fell in love with some of the different deep slate variants you could make, so I used some of that in the floor, roof, and under the walls before it got dark, so it was time for bed. I spent pretty much all of day 73 furnishing the storage hut. I started off by adding a dock out of the back because eventually I want to be able to go back there and start fishing to get things like name tags that I can use for some animals. And there are only so many different ways that you can decorate a storage area, so I tried adding things like barrels, chests, and some leaves to try and make it look cute. In the end, I added some windows and our storage area was complete. At this point, I was sick of having to run around the villager box every time I wanted to go trade with my favorite librarian, so I decided that I was going to give the villagers that had the best trades their own little huts to live in. So I started cutting down trees to get materials, and eventually I made the decision that they would get to live on the hill right next to my house. So I spent a good while landscaping the area before we eventually got to work, and we almost finished the first hut by the end of day 74. On day 75, I was working on the final touches of the villager hut when I realized that my storage area was completely unusable because I'd put barrels on top of chests. I swear I'm normally not this stupid. After fixing that, I stopped by the animal pen and we sheared some sheep to give our first hut a bed, which I promptly slept in. Knowing that this was only the first of many huts that I wanted to put in there, I started off day 76 by mining a bunch of andesite that we could use to make the neighbors' huts, and then I returned to the surface so that we could make lecterns to turn even more villagers into librarians. With the preparations all set, I put down a railway, kidnapped our mending villager, and we brought him over to his final forever home. But while doing this, some of the other villagers decided to escape, so Mending Dude had to spend a night in the minecart. On day 77, we finally got Mending Dude into his house, and we got him all situated so that he couldn't run have any dangerous visitors.
Now you're not going up there again.
I immediately got to work cutting down more trees, and we started construction on the neighbors' houses so that Mending Dude wouldn't be lonely. Construction carried over into day 78, and I even decided to add a little fireplace to the house to give it a little pizzazz. As soon as the house was complete, we went over and we brought Mending Dude's first neighbor into town, and we spent the rest of the day trying to reset his trades so that hopefully he would give me something good. But he refused to give me anything good, so I spent almost all of day 79 breaking his lectern over and over again to try and get him to trade me something good. And after numerous threats to his life,
Give me what I want, or we're gonna have a happy little accident. I don't want to kill you, alright? I'm breaking one. Buddy, you're lucky I didn't shove this axe into your forehead.
Eventually, he agreed to offer me a sharpness book, and I said why not, so I gave him some paper to lock in the trade before I left his hut a defeated man. Day 80 was spent constructing even more low-income housing because I was absolutely determined to get me an unbreaking villager. And then, to no one's surprise, I kept running out of materials. We transferred book nerd number 3 on day 81, and my mans was also refusing to give me a half-decent trade, so I spent a good portion of the day destroying the only lectern he had ever known until he decided to give me a slightly better mending trade. I was about to kill the first mending trader, but then the Twitch chat convinced me otherwise, so we traded with him, and I just questioned my life's decisions as we closed out the day. On day 82, I said YOLO and went right back to farming because I wanted to get more emeralds from trading the crops with the villagers. Now at this point, I had so many villagers that they were actually starting to spawn these iron boys, and, you know, I wanted free iron. Ah, no! I made a mistake! I made a horrible mistake! Baba Booey! You don't want these hands! You don't want these hands! First try. Not even scared. I kept up the farming on day 83 until I was viciously attacked by a wandering trader and did the only reasonable thing, and I defended myself from him and his cohorts. Then I felt bad that my sheep were spending the night out in the cold, so I started working on a cute little barn for him. Work continued through the next day on the barn, which I aptly named the Shaquille O'Neal Grand Adventure and Exotic Pet Shop, or as we call it, the Shack Shack. We got most of it done, but then I ran out of andesite, so I had to return back down to the mines to replenish, and eventually we were able to move our favorite sheepy boys into their new home. Day 85, I finished up the Shack Shack, and sadly we had to send the remaining sheep to the Forever Box to avoid overpopulation. This really put a downer on things, so I decided to cheer up the other animals by making the nether portal look all fancy. As night fell, I did my civic duty and protected the Shack Shack from all the baddies until I could put enough torches down to keep them from spawning, and I ended the day a hero. I tried adding a roof to the portal on day 86, and it turned out disgusting. So I played around with a couple of things that really didn't work, and eventually I left the portal essentially as I had found it. I used some of the extra trapdoors that I had made for this endeavor to add some shutters to my house, which I thought looked nice, and then we called it a day. Look, most of these days have been pretty good. They can't all be winners. On day 87, I bred the cows again for old time's sake before I finally transferred a bunch of my items into the new storage area. This then reminded me that I am sorely out of building materials, so for the first time in many moons, I returned to the mines to gather some more resources, and I ended up with a pretty nice haul. The next morning, I went and cut down some trees, and because I wanted to solidify just how much of a good Christian Minecraft world I have, I decided I wanted to build a church right next to the cow pen. Predictably, this was an absolute mess, because through building it, I ran out of pretty much every material I worked with, so there wasn't a lot to report today. On day 89, I finished the walls of the church before wait, no, what if I stripped the logs? Sure, that's better. Anyway, then I started getting the roof in place before oh my goodness, that roof sucks! I'm tearing it down. And I've destroyed everything I tried to do today. Day 90, and we're into the home stretch. Today, I finally settled on a roof design that I could tolerate, so I started off the day by finishing that. But, when I looked at the finished product, the walls were not passing the vibe check, so I cut out the stripped oak and I replaced it with dark oak planks. I then decided that the inside deserves some love too, so I started adding the flooring, realized I hated it, and gave up again. I started day 91 by assaulting Iron Man, who gave me the courage to go finish the church. So I fixed the crusty flooring, added the pews and altar, before I ventured to literal hell in order to light the church with shiny mushrooms. Then I said me my prayers and went to sleep. On day 92, I was, oh my notch, how am I not done with this yet?
No, are you actually kidding me? The entire day? Tadpole, all you had left was windows and decorating. What are you doing?
I wanted to build a windmill on day 93, so I grabbed a random assortment of oak blocks and I just started building. It turned out gorgeous, and so I even had enough time to go kill a bunch of baddies up in my sky-based killing machine before I went to the desert, dug up a whole bunch of sand, and we went back to the nether in search of my last 2 netherite ingots. To absolutely no one's surprise, blowing up the nether like this only got me so far, and mom always told me if you want to do something right, you gotta do it yourself. So I busted out the old blockbuster and I went to town on the nether. Mining like this is honestly really cathartic, and soon enough I had 8 ancient debris and I was able to make some cool black shoes, and even had an extra ingot. With most of my big projects out of the way, I decided that I wanted to make an area where I could just go and relax to spend my final days. So on day 95, I repurposed a bunch of the stripped oak logs that we had left over from the church, and I made an adorable little dock out behind the villager breeder. I ended up liking the first dock so much that I built a second one on day 96, which made me realize that those damn villagers were ruining my dreams of becoming a professional angler. And so they just had to go. Initially, I was going to infect them all with ligma, but I chose to spare their lives instead and started constructing a new box for the villagers to live in that was somehow more restrictive than the first. On day 97, I finished the walls of their new home, and then I built a state-of-the-art, impenetrable villager transport system to get them to their new area. Now, all this commotion caught the attention of another Iron Man, who I proceeded to have a deep and thoughtful conversation about our emotions and ambitions before I absolutely ransacked the original villager box and hopes that they would flee to the new one. Sadly, violence was not the answer on day 98 because despite having absolutely nothing left to cling on to, the villagers refused to leave their homes, and I spent most of the day trying to corral them through the tiny tunnel I had made. It proved to be less impenetrable than I had anticipated, so I tracked down the few of them that I could find and brought them back to their new home, and by this point I was absolutely fed up with the rest of them. The few that would listen to me were offered free minecart rides to the promised land, and the rest of them were, well,
I came to save you. You've come to die. You ignored my calls to help you. Where has this brought you now? Death. You have nothing except for the iron golem who's very scary.
On the penultimate day of my adventure, I finished off Villager Box V2 by giving them a farm and a roof before I picked a fight with yet another Iron Golem. And after improving my record to like 9-0 against these dudes, I bulldozed the original Villager Box and covered the area in sweet, sweet farmland before I went to sleep and prepared for dawn of the final day. Day 100. For the last day of my adventure, I wanted to tie up the one big loose end which I'd been neglecting this entire time, and that was my helmet. Now, it sucked. So I returned to the XP farm and grinded away to get back up to 30 levels, which I then used to make a pretty good helmet. I combined this helmet with the one that I almost broke during my trip to the end, and I made one last trade to get a mending book, which I added to make the ultimate helmet. Then, using my last netherite ingot, I completed the drip and finally had some full shiny black armor. And with this new armor, I just had to prove my dominance over those Iron Men one last time. As the day was coming to a close, I bred the cows one final time, and I took to the docks to fish as the sun closed out my great endeavor. And that was 100 days. Like I mentioned before, if you guys ever want to see me do stuff like this live, or like when I play on my main survival world, which is 7 years old, go follow me on Twitch. The link for that will be in the description, along with all of my other social media. This video took me a really long time to make, so I'd really appreciate a like, and if you want to keep seeing more stuff like this from me, please consider subscribing, because it costs you absolutely nothing, and it could really help me out. And yeah, if this video gets to like, I don't know, 500 likes or something like that, I'll do 200 days. And one final note, big thanks to LuketheNotable for starting this whole 100 days trend. I wouldn't have had the inspiration to do this if it wasn't for him, and I'm a huge fan. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and hopefully I'll see you all around. Tschüss.